Okay, so let's have a look at the equipment that you're going to use to focus on with your short game work. Whilst you can use any club in the bag, the main clubs that will be used will be your wedge system. Those wedges will run from 48 degrees of loft to 60 degrees of loft. I'm going to show you a little more about the clubs themselves so that you understand how they'll work most effectively. The club has several different components to it. The leading edge is going to be the part of the club that's going to dig into the ground. You're going to contact the ball first, and then this leading edge is either going to cut into the ground to make a divot, or it's going to graze the grass and allow you to make a clean contact with the golf ball. The loft of the club is what sets the ball airborne. We've talked about being 48 degrees of loft through to 60 degrees of loft. The ball will go off perpendicular to that angle on the club face. The grooves themselves, they help the spin of the ball. They help you to control that ball when it lands on the green and puts that magical backspin that everybody wants on the golf ball. A couple of factors that are very, very important that everybody should understand, particularly in the sand iron and in the normal wedges, is the bounce angle that's built into the sole of the club. Whilst it's not visible if I hold the clubs at this angle, what we can see if I bring them up here is quite simply that if I sit my sand iron onto this flat surface, the leading edge is risen and the back of the sole sits onto the club. Now that's a club that has probably 4 to 6 degrees of bounce, and that bounce will work for you when you're in the sand in particular, but has certain disadvantages when we're playing pitching shots, particularly off hard surfaces around the edge of the green. Now if I look at my normal wedge or other wedges in the bag and I put them here, what we can see is that the sole sits cleanly on the ground. There's no bounce on it as such, and that will allow us to make an easier and cleaner contact with the ball in most situations. Now the final factor, which is worth noting when the club's here, is this shaft angle. The shaft angle. When we set the club up, ideally the grip end of the club is slightly leading the leading edge of the club. So in other words, it's slightly forward. We're trying to bring the club back more or less identical to that at impact. Most players will slightly lean the shaft forward. The hands will just move a little nearer to the target at impact than they were at address. That's correct. What we don't want to do in the short game is what's called load the shaft or drive the shaft too much so it's very much forward. The worst factor would be the other extreme, which is actually to have the club head passing the hands and the shaft would be leaning away from the target at impact. The simple thing then that's happening is we're not catching the ball at the correct part of the arc of the golf swing, and we're bringing in the bounce sole of the club too exaggeratedly, and we're going to make a miss hit or poor contact with the ball.